What's going on, guys? I'm glad to have you back with us. And just like that, it didn't transition to the right screen, but don't worry. Live is okay. We'll be all right. There we go. See, I can talk and be the producer at the same time. So, what's going on, guys? How you doing? Gov, what was your initial thoughts of this slate?
Let's see. This week was fun.
It
This week
was.
fine because there was a couple of chalky pieces that hit, but but then there was some that like completely busted. So it was a good like up and down week. Made it so that the lineups that I felt like a lot of my lineups were still live going into the afternoon games, even though there were only 3. And then it was just how do those play out? And unfortunately, I didn't have a lot of guys like Juju and that actually went off in the afternoon. I didn't have a lot of Kenneth Walker. He was one of the chalk pieces I faded, whereas I had Eno Benjamin, who did not produce as a chalky, cheap running back. But all in all, it was a good weekend. It came out profitable, so I can't argue anything else.
See, what I like weeks where I make money, like obviously profit's good, but I like weeks where I make like profit, but I'm not like boastful about it. Like I'm kind of a strange guy. I'm very prideful about like my process and things like that, but I don't like to show it off in a weird way. So it's like a catch 22 for me. So I like weeks where I can come on and tell you what I did right and wrong. And I guess it's more my nature just to try to be transparent. I think if everything goes my way, like I'm just like waiting for the boomerang effect. I think that's a character flaw, to be honest with you, a bit in me as well. But like I kind of gotta accept it. So I like it where things go right and wrong for me because I feel like those are the weeks you can learn the most from. So actually, I think it was a couple weeks ago I had my biggest profitable week, which was like $60 into the profit. But I actually really like this week better, and I'll get into why from a personal standpoint a bit later. But the takeaway, I thought this was my best process lineup, and I'll get into why. But first, I want to shoot it to Donnie. Donnie, what was your game experience like? What were some of your takeaways? Any big news that you want to hit on?
I thought most of the games this week were interesting to watch. Even the more boring games like the Jets Packers one. At least we had Brees Hall to watch going into fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I had a Burrow Chase lineup, so that touchdown at the end to Chase really got my blood going. Logan was there for that.
Yep. That's what I meant. Like Brees Hall, Burrow, Lamar, and Andrews were doing okay until the Giants somehow took over that game. I don't even want to talk about that game. I don't even want to talk
the
about
Ravens are weird. The Ravens have
well, no, Lamar is not a good quarterback. That's the real problem. Like he's a rushing quarterback that has sort of a bullet. Like I'm sorry, he's not anything other than what Kaepernick was. That's like Lamar Jackson is the argument for why Colin Kaepernick should be in the league because they're basically the same quarterback.
Well, even
and
that,
so you know his ceiling, and he's going to have games like that.
Your strength in that offense is we're a running team. We're going to play well with the lead, play bad from behind. That's fine. But you've now had the lead every single game. You've been up by double-digit points, and you don't have a winning record.
God, I'm sharing your screen. I don't know if you can pull up the game, but
I'm going to try to.
It wasn't working for me earlier. It would show me all the games, but it wouldn't show me individual games on the computer.
Yeah, see, it keeps doing this on me too.
Okay, so it's a character flaw within the.
The app is having a problem. So like I can't like go to a specific game, but
I'll let Donnie keep going. Go ahead, Donnie, because I actually want to add to this because I think it'll be an interesting discussion.
Yeah. You're a running football team with a running quarterback. You've had the lead by double digits every single game so far, and you don't have a winning record. That's where is your recipe for success? Was this when things don't go your way? What are you supposed to do? I know I saw a stat earlier the other day. The Ravens are the first team to have a double-digit lead in all their games and never not to have a winning record. There've been 38 other teams to do it. It's gross.
Can we go off the tracks a little bit, Donnie, and explain to Gov, the person we know, and we don't got to use names, but he has the same take as Gov, but it's like the idiot version of Gov's take. Because I know why Gov has this opinion, but I almost want to use it as an example to prove, well, the process of the opinion can be valid, but your reasoning can be stupid. And we know this kid, this guy we used to play with, who has the same opinion as you go, but has a very stupid reason for it. Why don't you elaborate why what he calls Lamar Jackson? Do you remember? I can fill in if you don't.
I do not remember.
So Gov, he calls Lamar Jackson a running back. He refuses to call him a quarterback. And it's a troll job, right? You're not saying that. Let's be clear.
No, I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
He is a running quarterback. Like
Right.
That is his skill set. That is his strength. He's going to throw the ball.
Right.
And the problem is if he didn't have running, his throwing is barely league average at that.
Right.
To be fair. Now,
Right.
the league is very deep with quarterback. Like there's actually decent quarterbacks, like 20 of them on the 32 teams. And some teams have a decent like backup that can get you through. They can make the throws. They can keep your offense moving. Maybe not as explosively as the starters, but like there are actually some pretty good quarterbacks. And when it comes to raw throwing, Lamar is only average with all of them. But he's also like this superior athletic running, and his ability to hit those holes and play that run game quarterback is very, very good. Like near flaw. Like he is like one of the best. Like Josh Allen is mobile, but Lamar is a running quarterback.
So
and like, yeah.
But isn't this, and I want to correlate this to it, funny. It's funny how we use a lot of the same words in life. When you start like playing DFS and getting used to the terminology, you start like really realizing how it applies to everyday life. And I think it applies to this discussion as well. Aren't we just kind of falling into this weird trap where we're like, well, Lamar Jackson's a rushing quarterback. Matthew Stafford's a strong arm quarterback. You know, and we have to have these distinctions where it's like, for example, Tyler Higbee was seeing more targets than Amari Cooper for the beginning of the season. And he was clearly the number 2 there for a while Robinson kind of got familiar with the offense. And obviously it's his first time in a good offense. So like he obviously wasn't ready for the expectation, I would say. His talent was always there with Robinson, and we saw it this week, but he wasn't ready to take that step. And so Stafford used Higbee as a wide receiver. Now, us as DFS players or as football players would say, well, he was a tight end because of where he lined up. And that's my point with Lamar Jackson. It's like this guy we knew had this bad opinion of Lamar Jackson being a rushing quarterback as a negative, where you're saying that you're evaluating him from a strengths and a weaknesses standpoint, which is what I think a lot of smart gamblers do, which is why we get a bad rap, because people want to view gambling or DFS or fantasy under one umbrella. But I think a lot of smart people that consume content like this understand process over plays. And just like if you took away Matthew Stafford's arm strength and you gave him, you know, Mac Jones' arm strength, there would be different players, you know? And so I think we need to get away from positions and start playing these players for who they are. Like the 2 tight ends lineups, for example, if you wanted to go with Andrews and Kelsey, you're not playing 2 tight ends, you're playing 2 receivers. You know what I'm saying? Or even like a Taysom Hill and a Jameis Winston in the same lineup at FanDuel this week had Jameis played, or Andy Dalton. You're playing the upside of having 2 quarterbacks. That's the upside. That's an example of where it didn't work because Taysom didn't have enough quarterback snaps. But the idea of that, if that's the narrative you're telling yourself, that would be that discussion. But I think we get so wrapped up into, well, Lamar Jackson has to be a quarterback because that's the position he plays. But I don't think we have to be so reliant on the position, if that makes sense.
Makes some sense, yeah. I get what you're saying there.
Well, that's the thing, too. It's like we don't always have to agree. Like, as long as we get there and we have fun, we can have fun different ways. You can pay with $1 with all quarters. I can pay with $1 bill. We can get to the same result, just different avenues. And I want to speak to that, Donnie. It's like, I loved last week how you mentioned what you liked about fantasy football and the things you didn't like about it, because I thought it was a very honest assessment of someone who had experienced it for the first time and it was so new. It wasn't just Christmas morning and you were trying to glom on and get attention on this DFS show and, just tell us all the positives. You were willing to share both sides of the coin. And I think that's really where you see the transparency. Well, I can tell we're kind of in that rut where we don't know what to say. Let me just say, Donnie, you built your first lineup, right?
Yes.
With Joe Burrow. Okay.
And Jamar Chase.
You had the 2 best players on the slate. I got it pulled up now. They were the 2 highest scoring players. I don't mean this to shun you. That lineup did not cash. And I'll pull it up here in a minute. But the reason wasn't your fault. The reasoning behind the plays was really smart. And
just like the Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow thing, you could not have guessed that they were going to be the 2 top players on the slate in the same week.
Well, while I pull this contest up, and Gav's got the whole list there, so you guys can compare it. But Donnie, speak to why you chose to do it.
The lineup in general, or the
two top players, because I do think it's kind of unique to see the 2 top players be the overall 2 best players on the slate. So why was the correlation so smart for you?
Well, there was a point where this was a last second switch where I was going to originally have Diggs and not Chase. It was going to be Diggs and was it Olave? No, it was
Olave.
It was Olave. Yeah. But the Olave injury, Gov had given me the suggestion to move down from Diggs, go Chase, and get Gabe Davis from that same game, which just made a lot of sense to me. I'm still getting the talent, and I'm getting a quarterback wide receiver connection that's very good, along with the fact that, a weird reason, but I think it definitely plays into the type of people that they are. It's their first time back in that stadium since the national championship. They probably wanted to recreate some of that magic a little bit.
It was a de facto home game for them with LSU fans there. Like, it
right.
really was.
I mean, there is definitely some sort of thing they wanted to do where, they wanted to try and recreate the magic they had from the national championship game. And it worked out great fantasy point wise. And even they both had good games, not to an extent that I did not expect. I thought maybe you get 25-ish from both of them. But
yeah, Donnie, it's almost like we have natural chemistry. You set Gov up perfectly because I think this is Gov's lane. I want to transition really quickly. Gov, speak to narratives and how narratives can both be good and bad for a lineup construction. Like, this narrative honestly played a factor for Donnie. When should it play a factor and when should it be ignored? And then, how do you balance the 2?
I usually don't take any of these kind of factors into much consideration. Like they're the very last thing. It's like if I
That's
like
interesting,
two
'cause
guys
I do.
equally, then it's like maybe I use it as the coin flip.
Use
But
it
like
as a tiebreaker.
right, and not even like I don't like. I'm not saying I'm going to use this as a tiebreaker. I'm like if I go through 5 different tiebreakers and we're at like the 10th one and now they're still even in my mind, then maybe I use something as crazy as this as the. But like that's not like anything I'm even really thinking about. That being said, mathematically, if I liked Jamar Chase or Burrow, both of them having a ceiling game like they did sort of correlates with each other. Like if Burrow's throwing for 300 yards and 3 touchdowns, Chase is probably going to have 100 yards and a touchdown or 2. And that's exactly what happened. He threw for 303 and Chase had 132 in 2 of them. It's like those two correlate well. So it's like when one does well, the other usually does well, which is why we try to correlate in our lineups. It's like, well, I might as well try to only get like one thing right on 3 players. Because like when Burrow is right, Chase is going to be right with him. And usually someone else is good. And to be honest, Tyler Boyd did not do horribly on this slate. If you used him as the other bring back, or even Joe Mixon, the running back, you were probably fine. As a double stack. And then, of course, Kamara was good on the bring back.
Right.
Or Traquan if you wanted to go cheap.
Well, it's almost like we kind of figured out how to work this game in terms of the idea of things. And we talked about how Lamar Jackson being a rushing quarterback makes him valuable. It's like that correlation in this lineup made it valuable. If Donnie had just played Jamar Chase, the lineup would not have as much optionality in it, wouldn't have as much correlation in it even. But by doing that, you're basically limiting your options because you're trying to be as smart as possible. You're like, well, I'm going to go with Kamara because if Joe Burrow and Chase get there, then there's going to be points, And then so like I was saying, you got to get left right, which is just a smart way to look at things, It's like if me and you go to a potluck and the 3 of us had a picnic, like the less stuff I got to carry, the better. So if we all just contribute and then we meet up at the park, we can all carry some baggage. And that's how you should look at lineups, is these block theory methods. And that's why you can take, a snowflake in a lineup here and there, or like an under-projected outcome and still have a good week. I think one of the top winners in the red zone contest this week had Zach Gentry, the tight end for the Steelers, at basically minimum price, only get like 1.4 points. And so did I in a lineup as well. Obviously, my lineup didn't cash because a lot of my other pieces didn't work. But that lineup actually finished, I think, in the top 10 because it allowed him to get to everything else. And because of the correlation, it just made sense to play a cheap tight end in that construction. So there's a difference between making sense of something logically and emotionally making sense of it. Like the two have to exist on some level.
Agreed.
Donnie, what was the thing that happened this week that you feel like is fool's gold or that people are going to chase? I did that on purpose, by the way, pun intended. Because you were right about Chase this week. What are people going to chase next week that's going to be bad?
I wouldn't be surprised if people kept on trying to double down on Kenneth Walker. Maybe it works out, but prices will continue to rise, and we'll see how that works. Maybe he does get that production again. I don't see it being a weekly thing.
It's hard for me to believe that too with Seattle and Arizona. Like,
right.
This was a weird game for Seattle. Like Kenneth Walker did get his, and he got there, but somehow they completely forgot about Lockett and Metcalf, who have just been smashing all year. And it's like, how do you go from an offense that looks amazing and Tyler Lockett getting 8+ targets a game to all of a sudden you have a game where you won, but he only got 5 targets? It's like, I don't know how that offense is actually going to run.
I think you can do this for me, Gov. Because I know you can't do the individual games, but you can siphon or filter on the DK Live screen the wide receivers, right?
Yeah.
Can you please pull that up so I can make a point?
Got him right here.
Okay. So I got Tyler Lockett on the screen. I'm going to tell Donnie why this was a really smart play, and he should just close it. I think he knows this, but I want to make this point. Tyler Lockett was a better play than most of these guys. He was a better play than Juju Smith-Schuster, for example, in my opinion, because Smith-Schuster hadn't been productive, and then when he was running like a Zach Ertz type route tree where he was falling down. So the upside, it had to come off of touchdowns. So the only way Smith-Schuster made sense was if you thought Mahomes was going to just go crazy and throw a bunch of touchdown passes, which he did. But if we would have got a rushing game script, I don't think Juju would have got there because the run after the catch hadn't been there all season. Now, it was this week, but that doesn't mean it was a good process play because it worked out one time. We saw Hasty, the running back that bounced around like a pinball machine for like a couple of years, score a touchdown for Jacksonville. That doesn't mean he was a better play than Najee Harris. Like sometimes we have to not look at results and just look at the idea of the lineup. And Donnie was smart enough to pair it with other Seattle options like Walker. So, yeah, Lockett failed, but Walker hit. You know what I mean? So I like that idea. Like if you had played Matt Ryan naked, Gov, that'd be a bad process play. It would have got there this week, but it would have been a bad process play. But if you paired it with Pittman or you paired it with Jackson, because you're like, everyone's going to play Ito, I'm going to play Jackson and Matt Ryan and just play the legacy that, yeah, Jacksonville's just a bad team. Everyone likes them. They're a bad team. Similar to what some people think historically about the Lions, that they're just going to historically always be bad. And some people, as long as that's your process play and you correlate it, it makes sense. And any other takeaways, Ben?
I think Ramondre Stevenson is here. I will say that. He's going to take over that starting job probably from Harris because I don't think they re-signed Harris, and we're going to see a lot more Stevenson now.
So your thought process is not only this year, which I think is interesting because we play a weekly sport, but I do think the long-term potential and the long-term projections are still valuable to a daily fantasy sport. So you're confident in Stevenson based on their confidence of him long-term.
Yes. Now,
I do think Ramondre has clearly taken over the top position in that job. Now, do I trust Belichick and them to actually give Guy a workhorse role? Not really. But while they're injured, they might not have a choice.
Yeah, all their other guys that they liked left. So it's him. They have Strong and JJ Taylor.
If Harris gets healthy, they'll keep him just so they have another, or they'll cycle through like they've had LeGarrette Blount for years, or like they will find another dude to put with Ramondre.
Oh yeah, no, they'll draft somebody.
Yeah, they will just keep cycling through guys. So like the Patriots running backs, I may not have faith in, but I do like Ramondre. He is definitely their guy right now.
Yeah, and there's nobody that they love behind him. So for the next couple weeks at least, probably.
He will probably get 20 touches in a game where New England's going to want to run the ball a lot.
especially if Mac Jones doesn't play again this week, which I know they keep saying they're optimistic, but they've been optimistic for 3 weeks that he's going to play apparently, which is
That's just Belichick.
that's
Belichick.
Yeah. I mean, Mac Jones will probably not play for another 2 weeks. Let's be honest. So it's something to keep an eye on. Also, for the past 2 weeks now, Jacoby Myers has given fantasy production. Not much. I don't know if it was worth his value, but 2 weeks in a row now, he's had, decent games.
Yeah.
Well, he is a target monster, so when he gets his stuff, he will have decent games.
I think it's interesting, though, with Zappy playing.
Yeah, talk amongst yourself. I'm going to use the bathroom really quick. I'll be right
You don't like Tyquan Thornton?
Oh, I like Tyquan Thornton. I just don't trust Belichick to get him in the offense.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. So
I know.
I did see that catch Myers had early in the game. That was an amazing catch.
Oh, that was Parker, actually.
Was it Parker?
Yeah, it was Devontae Parker. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I just.
Oh, that was Parker. Yeah. Still, guys are going to have to make plays for New England.
That's why I kind of like the Parker when the Parker trade was made, because he's got a guy who's going to try to make plays. Mac Jones has struggled to get him the ball. That's a big reason why he's thrown as many interceptions as he has this year, because he just keeps on forcing it to a guy when he does not have the arm talent. That's where I'm at with that. I'm still, as a Patriots fan, a fan of move off of Mac before you pay him, but I get why you wouldn't. Stability is stability. I'd rather lose and not have a stable quarterback and just wait till I find the guy, personally.
Yeah, because you can see, if I pull up quarterbacks, who had good days? Burrow had a good day because we thought he would. I thought he would in New Orleans. Josh Allen is Josh Allen. He had another good day. Matt Ryan, I guess, comes out of nowhere to just play Jacksonville really well. So,
yeah, 58 passes.
I guess anyone who throws the ball 60 times can put up enough volume to be a good fantasy score. It's just wow, good Lord.
Yeah, no, I think it's also interesting because we were so high on Jacksonville's defense in Friday's show.
Yeah, I was high on them.
We were so confident that it was the defense to play, and it was a not miss.
But that's where football will humble a man.
Yeah,
that's a clear. Again, that's something we can look at. Why did we think that? Because Jacksonville's defense has been playing quite well this year,
and Matt Ryan has stunk.
And on top of that, Matt Ryan has stunk. Now, if you look deeper, when they played earlier this year, you try to look at that game, Indy lost 24-0. So it's that last game, the defense just absolutely destroyed them too. But that was also a game where Taylor played, but I think that was the first game of him really being banged up. Yeah. And Pittman did not play in that game. So the last time they played, they really didn't even have their full offense. Whereas in this game, they knew they weren't going to have Taylor and had already figured on Jackson and Lindsey to play. And now they have their receiving core that's basically what they were planning on with Pittman and then Pierce. And so now they're at home and their offense is healthier-ish, but at least able to move. And Matt Ryan, for all his faults, he knows the game of football and can move an offense down the field. If nothing else, he's like Joe Flacco. He can make sure the offense is consistent. But 60 pass attempts is still, my God. They knew without Jonathan Taylor he had to dink and dunk, and he just dink and dunked.
I mean,
and what happens? Michael Pittman is 13, 16 targets, doesn't even get the touchdown, still gets there on just volume alone as a top receiver on the week. It's my word.
And I can't even was Jacksonville missing any pieces on defense?
No, as far as I know, they were coming in like maybe not fully healthy. They were
They were
coming in
relatively
a
healthy.
solid week 16, ready to go.
That game shocked me. That was actually,
definitely my shocker. Like, as
speaking
much
of
as I
which-
was shocked by the Baltimore New York game, New York's been playing so well. It was like it could happen.
Speaking of which, it shocked us so much that was our lock of the week, and I mean, we were all pretty confident to say that the Jaguars will not only cover, they'll hit the money line and win the game.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this question: Why were we so confident? And would your confidence change if they played 10 times? So let's say they play the next 10 days. How many times do we take Jacksonville? How many times do we take the Colts?
I would have.
I probably take
before the game,
Jacksonville
I'd
every
take them 10
time and
times,
just
yeah.
deal with it.
Exactly. So I want to do this new segment because I think it will be a kind of a fun experiment. If it doesn't work, we'll probably just never do it again. What if I told you going into this slate that Pittman was going to outscore Lockett?
Like, I could believe it because Pittman's the number one and could get like Pittman getting the work he did isn't like unheard of. Just
Right.
the massive volume of like I feel like Pittman got the target share he was supposed to get. I was just projecting something closer to 40 pass attempts for Matt Ryan, not 60.
Right. So here's what we'll do with this segment. I'll tell you a what if, and I'll tell you the facts. Now, the fact is, Pittman is a good player, but Pittman plays like a tight end. And as long as you understand that and you accept that for the variance, play it every day until Sunday. Like literally play until Sunday. Going into that game, he had only seen his deepest target going into that week was 17 all season.
Yep.
He
averaged about 10 yards a catch in this game.
Correct. I even have it further down thanks to NFL Savant. He's ran the most hitch routes of any wide receiver in the league. In fact, he has more hitch routes than most tight ends do. And so that's kind of brings us back to the conversation we had with Lamar Jackson being a rushing quarterback and Matthew Stafford. It's like you got to play to their strengths, and you got to be able to recognize, hey, this is the projection I have for this player, because what if, this is what I expect. Now, what if this happens? And that what if could always happen, So, for example, Duvernay, I think, was a good play. He was as good of a play as Juju Smith-Schuster, at least. You got a talented quarterback. You got an opportunity wide receiver. That's what I view Juju and Mahomes. You got a talented quarterback and then a wide receiver with a great offense. The opportunity is there based on injuries. And so, one gets there, one doesn't, but I don't think they're that different of a play.
Well, also, is it not much different of a play from the Wan'Dale Robinson play either, where it's yes, the price range is obviously different based on their talent that we've seen and what they've done in real life, but
expand on that, Donnie. Go ahead. Expand on that. Tell the people what we did, because we actually got it right both ways. So I think this will be a fun conversation. We were just deciding between Robinson and Smith from the Saints once the opportunity opened up with Olave. And we were both right, but I think the process is kind of fun. So why don't you explain that?
Well, I mean, they both were projected into a spot that they weren't expected to be in, so their price wasn't at the right range, and we're gonna see certain guys step up. If you have the talented quarterback, or just a quarterback that will get the ball to the receivers, you expect some sort of production. Duvernay got almost no production.
Although he did get the volume because he had 5 targets. I have it up on the screen to show that Duvernay did get 5 targets, in that same sort of price range down here.
Which is
But,
what
like,
he's been getting every week
Yeah.
as well.
So consistent, but he only caught the one pass for 14 yards. Whereas up here where we were talking to the other guys, Traquan had 3 targets.
Right,
So
and he just
Wandale
happened
had
to have
4.
that one touchdown.
And also, but also you look like both Wandale and Traquan caught 3 balls. Wandale had 1 more target. Wandale caught 3 for 37, one of them being a touchdown. Traquan was 3 for 43 and a touchdown. It's only 6 yards, but like when you're only getting a couple of catches, 6 yards means Traquan gets a slightly deeper depth, like average depth of target. So like,
Which is why we avoided Callaway.
Exactly. But it's also one of those processes where like I sort of am willing to take the dart. If I'm taking a dart throw on a guy, a cheap guy at the bottom, I want guys with big play ability. And Traquan had shown that and shows here in his stat line that he had a slight more big play ability than Wandale. Now, we really didn't know what Wandale's big play ability was. He hadn't really gotten to play.
Which is why you play him. That is the process.
But here's the thing. They both had a touchdown. They are very, very different touchdowns. Wandale had a nice catch on a bad throw on the goal line. Traquan had a bigger catch. They were at like the 20-yard line, and it was like a 20-yard touchdown reception. It's very different. It ended in the same result around the same points, but the big playability again was there with Traquan.
Well, it's like paying taxes and Christmas, right? You're going to have deliveries, and people expect to get something back, some kind of rebate. You expect a gift, you expect some kind of cash back, but obviously the anticipation and the excitement around Christmas is far more attractive than the logical, boring nature of accounting. And so we can get trapped by that theory, though, where it's like, we haven't seen it, so it could be a 40-point game. And then the guy goes out and scores 5 points. Or you play the process boring guy, Duvernay, because he is the number one guy, even though he hasn't done anything sexy in his whole career, but he's consistent. He's the Anquan Bolden of his football team. So I just think you have to be comfortable with the style of player you're choosing. And it's not to be right or wrong. Like, what if I told you, for example, Gov, because I watched this game, that Devin Duvernay was a better play than Amari Cooper because of those 5 targets, Duvernay, 2 of those 5 targets were red zone, end zone targets. In fact, one bounced right off his fingertips on a diving effort. If he makes that catch, who knows what that game looks like? Maybe the Ravens win that game even. Like, maybe the whole game narrative changes. But we definitely would know he'd be over 10 points. And that would change the play. But that's why you can't do that. Right? And I know Donnie was watching the same game, so you know what I'm talking about. 2 of those targets were red zone targets, like right off his hands.
Yep.
And we had a situation at the end of the game where Saquon sat his butt down at the 1-yard line. If he goes in and scores that touchdown, you have more chance at more targets. I mean, things could have been very different in this game based on 2 little things.
Well, it happened this season with Nick Chubb. It actually hurt his team and might have cost the Browns a loss in real life. It won people money in fantasy. That is the what-if scenario. Like, what if he actually did the smart football play? It would have hurt fantasy, but it helped fantasy, it hurt real football. Like, there's a give and take to this. It really is. And that's the luck element we just have to accept. I'm okay accepting it because it's fun. It's fun as hell when you see an end around to Braxton Berrios for a touchdown because you don't normally see it. He doesn't get a ton of usage, but you can also enjoy, the Delvin Cook touchdown, even though he probably got lucky with like a 70-yard scamper because going into that, he had like 16 yards in the first half. So I just found those things interesting. For example, Saquon Barkley, I believe I saw had 16 yards rushing going in the first half. He finished the second half with like 90, So it is the tale of two halves. And if I didn't tell you that with like analytics, you wouldn't probably know it. You might just base it off of, oh yeah. For example, this will be my last point, and we can move on to spreads or any other topics you guys have. Donnie's lineup, and we'll go back to Gov with the DK Game Center, had the two highest scorers right on the whole entire slate. Lost. Our lineup with Duvernay won. Does that mean Donnie's lineup was worse? Ours is better? No, but it just proves to you that even the snowflakes or even the heat emojis are not equal. It depends ownership. It depends when, where, and how, as much as the plays. This line had Lamar Jackson. You had Chase and Burrow and didn't cash. And it's fine.
They weren't even high. Well, Burrow, it wasn't that high ownership either. So,
right. And it's fine because look at a guy like Diggs, right? Donnie had, you went Gabe Davis. You were debating all week between Diggs and Davis. It wasn't a choice of like, oh, Donnie made a stupid choice. He hates Diggs. No, based on the process of the lineup, Gabe Davis made sense. If Gabe Davis gets half of this production that Diggs got, then, and maybe he did. I think he got like 16. So I guess he got right around half. If he gets a little bit over half, then your lineup wins. And it probably wins more than this one did. But that's the what-if scenario of fantasy. Like, that's the luck factor. Go, why don't you speak on that? You've been quiet, man. I want to get you in here. You always have good insight.
I was just reading the chat real quick. So, let's see.
Oh, yeah, Logan, if you want to put up that chat.
Yeah.
I'm always cautious because we get some spammers here and there. So
that's why I was reading it first to see. It just looks like a normal question. I'm like,
Jacob,
I mean, that's a really weird trade for someone to like offer you. But like, my thought is if two of those three guys, other than Rodgers, are going to start for you every single week, then yes, you make that trade. But if Jacobs, D-Hop, and Zeke are going to sit on your bench, don't get rid of Josh Allen.
Well, and D-Hop is now a wide receiver number one in an offense that doesn't really have a wide receiver number two that knows the offense.
That's what I'm saying, but I don't know what the rest of his team is. Like, if for some reason he has two other solid wide receivers and D-Hop would just be a flex play, if that most weeks, or the same thing with Jacobs and Zeke. Like, that's the thing. To get all of that for just a quarterback, he's only giving up one piece. So the three pieces he's getting, like, he's going to have to drop guys in return, most likely.
Right.
So it's like, if Jacobs, D-Hop, and Zeke are not guys you're going to want to start every week or most weeks, then I don't think it's worth it just to go from Allen to Rodgers. Like, not that Rodgers is bad, but again, if you're not going to be using the other three pieces, Allen is clearly the best quarterback to have this year.
Yeah.
And I will say I don't love Zeke, so maybe that's the one guy I don't like in this trade.
That's really my thought is, if I'm not going to be using Jacobs and D-Hop in my lineup for most of the year, then I wouldn't make this trade. But I don't know what his actual rest of his roster is, but that would be my advice. I wouldn't just lock button accept this unless you know Jacobs is now going to be your RB2 or RB1, and same thing with D-Hop. Maybe he has Josh Allen because he took him early, and he has kind of a weak team around him, and he could use another another number one wide receiver and a number one running back.
Well, let me make this correlation just to like prove prove a point even further because we don't know all the specifics of his team. Donnie, tell me your favorite food. I'm gonna put you on the spot on purpose.
My favorite's what?
Your favorite food.
Um,
You can take your time. The reason I do this is I just don't want the name to influence my point here. So you can name anything.
I don't.
Chocolate.
Chocolate. Okay. Now, if you're overweight and you're obese and you can barely get out of bed, right? Chocolate would be bad. If you're a child and you're going on Halloween, then if you get rocks like Charlie Brown and your Halloween candy, you're going to be really depressed. Both people would be depressed. Both people would be sad for different reasons. This is where fantasy football has to be fun. Do the trades that you find entertaining, that you want to watch, that make sense. So both things have to exist. The trade has to make sense. You know, you have to obviously, like, let's say Donnie really enjoyed quarterbacks, right? You were just like quarterback whisperer. You love breaking down the all 22 on Monday morning, Donnie, of all the quarterbacks. Well, Donnie's not going to go into a draft and draft 5 quarterbacks in his fantasy league. That would just be a terrible process, right? But Donnie might say, I got such an edge with my quarterback breakdown that I enjoy quarterback play so much that this is my edge. I'm going to wait to the last couple rounds to draft quarterbacks because I feel like this sharpens my team, and therefore I can go with a more conservative build. So I would say you got to favor what you enjoy. Like maybe you're on the East Coast and you get to watch more Cowboys games, so you favor Zeke, or you know, he just fits your style of your preferred. That doesn't mean it's good or bad. So like I always look at trades like that, and people always are like, well, based on the analytics, you should go for it on 4th down, or based on the trade, you should. It's like it's also a feel game. So whatever makes you feel good. I like Zeke, for example. These guys don't. I like Zeke for some unbiased reasons, and then I like him for some analytical reasons. Like I think he's their toughest runner. I think he's their goal line rusher, which is true. But I also just like his style too. And I also just want to cheer for him, you know? So that would be my tiebreaker. You know, Gov talked about tiebreakers in the beginning with narratives. Donnie believes in narratives. Gov, not as much. That doesn't mean you don't pay attention to narratives at all. Like at the end of the season, for example, players will have bonuses, right? If they get over 1,000 yards, they get $10,000, for example. That stuff's going to matter in DFS in a couple weeks. It just will. It will play a factor. For some people, it will play more of a factor than others. So there's always different changing elements to fantasy, but you should always enjoy it. That would be my number one advice. Anything else you guys want to add to that?
No, I think that sounds good.
Yeah.
So why don't we do this? Why don't you guys produce the show? Obviously, I worked all day. There might be something I'm missing. I'm an amateur podcaster. We're not big yet. What are we missing? What do we need to talk about before we get to the spreads? We know we got to get to the spreads. But is there any other topics you guys want to mention? It could be anything.
The Cardinals' offense is going to be interesting to maybe consider playing next week just because of all the moving pieces. Kyler really is only comfortable with 2 of the guys in Ertz and Rondell Moore, and I guess you would also say Hopkins, but Hopkins hasn't played for a bit.
Yeah,
so,
but he's definitely like he'll be good with Hopkins.
Right. So do you go and try to play one of the cheaper receivers on the Cardinals? Do you go, or do you say, hey, Robbie Anderson's going to get playing time. He'll be in on the 3rd downs. He'll be in the red zone. And we're just going to bank on that.
I think it depends on your level of enjoyment and anticipatory risk, Donnie. Honestly, it's like when you build a Christmas list, right? Do you want to build a list for your parents so that when you get what you want, or do you want that excitement of the unknown, right? And sometimes you can't have it both ways. It'd be obviously great 2020 vision if we could build a showdown slate on Tuesday morning for Monday Night Football. That's not how it works. So there is some projection that goes into it. I will tell you, Hopkins has only lost 2 games, I think, with Kyler Murray over the last 10. I think their record over the last 10 games when Hopkins and Murray are active, they're 8-2 over the last 10 games.
I think Hopkins is a great guy, like who's going to get a lot of targets because they're going to want to force him the ball. Kyler's missed him, so.
But some people age really badly,
right?
Really quickly. And the argument, I mean, we shouldn't mention it because it is true. He got popped for steroids, right, or some kind of illegal substance like steroids. I don't think he was trying to buff up. Like, he's in great shape. He's a professional athlete. The reason why, from all accounts, these are accusations, of course, not proven facts, but all indications would be that he's getting older and he did it for preventative health reasons because we know that it helps you stay in the field. Will Fuller did it a couple years ago and admitted it on a podcast very openly. So, not saying he is washed or ready to not be good. I'm just saying, just because of what he was a couple of years ago, or because he was a All-Pro in 2010 or whatever year, doesn't mean that's the type of production you're getting now. There's a reason they draft rookies every year. I mean, it's just the natural progression of things. Gov, you got anything to add?
I've actually. It's kind of sucks. I've really been liking Buffalo, and they're not on the slate this week, so it's like, what am I gonna do?
Yeah.
So I'm kind of upset about that, but there's also NBA tomorrow, so my brain is in a lot of different places right now. That's the other thing is we get the NBA first look tomorrow. We got the games tomorrow night. That's going to be amazing.
Let me do that because we're going to cover some NBA. We're going to be a multi-sport podcast. We want to be fair to both sports. How does the NBA, and you can say Logan, this is a stupid transition. This makes no sense. Be transparent with me if it has no effect on you at all. How does NBA starting or any of the major sports affect when the most popular sport's going on? So the most popular sport for DraftKings, it's obvious, it's their biggest prize pool, is the NFL. But now the NBA, probably their second biggest sport, is starting. How does that influence people's lineups? How will that influence our bankrolls? And can we take advantage of that edge in any way?
I'm not sure if there is an edge to take advantage of, but there will be people who are not good enough at certain sports. Maybe they should focus on just football and something, and they will dip their toes in. And so for the one thing, you will start seeing that the football contest might start ratcheting down. We know, near the end of the season, the play action goes from 100K to first, to 75K to first, to 50K to first. And the entries start to get smaller because they expect less people in football later in the season as hockey and NBA and all of that starts to really get going.
Honestly, though, that's why I prefer the Canadian Football League and the USFL and things like that. I find the smaller slates or when you're looking one way, I like to look the other way.
We got another trade thing as well.
I'm just naturally talking about trading. I'm a type of trader that likes their value, and I always like it when people are looking one way and I look the other way. So we'll pull this trade up down a bit. As I pull this trade up and read it for clarity, why don't you talk about, are you excited? Are you nervous? Where's your fatigue level? Because it's the first time you've really experienced fantasy and sports, and you've really been enjoying these podcasts based on our discussions. But now that we have 2 sports going on, how do you think you're going to manage that from a fatigue standpoint? So I do think an amateur kind of like perspective, someone who hasn't experienced it could lend itself very well to some of these newer viewers that we got.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I got a lot more going on, making sure I'm keeping up with my studies. So
Fair enough. Like that's all important though.
I think that's going to be a big thing. Like I'm going to have to set aside nights where I don't pay attention to any basketball, things like that, so I could make sure I'm not falling behind in the class or do some extra work, things like that.
And you should. And you should. Like that's what me and Greg were talking about with our evergreen content in the beginning of the year. It's not how much you play or what your bankroll is or how many contests you win. It's about entering and playing the contest that you feel most comfortable with and knowing that limitation of like, I could build a good lineup tonight, but I work a shift. I have a pool tournament. I have a remote work. My dog unexpectedly got sick. Like things are going to happen. And then you have to make the adjustment off of that. You can't just like beat yourself up. Because Donnie, you could honestly come in and be like, I had Joe Burrow and Chase. I had the two top guys. I should have won. No, because we picked all the other players as well.
Okay.
Picking players. Why don't we talk about this trade here?
I think this trade you would be getting fleeced. Jamar Chase is always going to give you production. Breece Hall's production is going up and up and up. And Olave gets a bunch of targets. As to where Kupp has been a little injured. And Dalvin Cook has, injury concerns over the past years. I like the young guys to keep giving production and the older guys to fall off a little bit as the season goes on.
See, I'm not that far. Like, the only part I don't like is that he's given up Olave, which is going to make his wide receiver room very thin. But, like, Dalvin Cook is an upgrade on Breece Hall, if only slightly. Like, I could even see the argument that Dalvin Cook, Breece Hall, they're going to be about the same by the end of the year because they're both going to be used and both going to be the main running backs in those offense, barring injury, of course. Now, the Chase Kupp one, they're also both going to be very close to each other at the end of the year. But I do think Kupp probably wins that battle just because from what I've seen from the Rams offense, they're going to rely on him still. Will he be as good as he was last year? Will he be as good as he was last year? I don't know. Like, I'm not so sure about that. Like, what was Kupp's injury? I didn't actually see his injury from yesterday, but I didn't see it being that bad.
Well, it might not have been that bad, but if he keeps playing, has to keep on getting this workload, it has that chance of getting worse and worse.
It's entirely possible. But, like, I think I just don't like how it would make his wide receiver. Like, if he could do that trade and, like, trade one of those other running backs instead of Olave. Because, like, if he trades Breece Hall for Dalvin Cook, and then he still has CMC, Dameon Pierce, ETN, and Najee, like, he's absolutely loaded at running back. Like, getting Cook over Breece is not anything to trade Chase for. Like, if they're even, I think you're giving up Chase and Olave for Kupp, and I don't know if you need to do both of that. Although I'm not, like, if you break it down as those two things, I'm not 100% against this trade, but it is basically what you trust Kupp. If you trust that Kupp will stay healthy throughout the year, this trade is doable. But again, it makes your wide receiver room thin. If you do this trade, you're probably then dropping ETN and picking up whatever.
Well, no, he doesn't need to drop because he's giving away 3 players. So he'd have a free roster spot anyway.
Yeah, and please comment back.
So at that point he would be able to just like pick up a wide receiver from free agency, but he is now replacing his wide receiver room that was Chase, Mike Williams, Waddle, and Olave to Kupp, Mike Williams, Waddle, and whoever. Which, as you get later in the season and you get through your bye weeks, starts to not matter as much who that 4th or 5th guy is.
Maybe you get a Robbie.
And so, like, maybe to run through the playoff, or even just to get through like your bye weeks, and then during the playoff weeks, you have Kupp, Mike Williams, Waddle instead of Chase, Mike Williams, Waddle.
Well,
So like if you think you're in the playoff push, I might do that so that I have those 3 receivers, and then I can start Cook, CMC, Damon Pierce every week.
well,
So like again, this is a very close trade. I think it's 50-50 in my mind.
here's what I'll say. And I'll tie it back to my fantasy league without giving you a specific answer, because I think a specific answer would lean you in the wrong direction. Because like I told the first guy, you should factor in, especially in fantasy leagues with friends and family, the fun factor of it. Like you should enjoy the process, right? So I looked at my free agent acquisition chart value before I made trades. Like for example, I traded Kirk and Herbert from the Bears, the running back, for Kyle Pitt for Ezekiel Elliott. But I like that because I was able to get Pierce from the Colts. And at the time, I knew Pierce had started to see more targets, especially deep targets. We mentioned how Pittman kind of took over that tight end role over the middle, and Pierce was their deep shot guy. I wouldn't have made that 1-for-2 trade had I not loved somebody on the free agent, the free agent wire, and so I made the trade. So I think you have to, when you think about trades and thinking about things like this, you have to think about the totality of what it allows you to do outside of the player's names. For example, I'll give you another example of this trade. If you were to make this trade, I think you're betting on a thing that we haven't spoke about yet, so this would be a good transition. Where do we think Christian McCaffrey goes? Because if you make this trade, are you making it that he's a Panther? Are you making it that he's a Bill? Like maybe
I don't see anyone being able to trade for Christian McCaffrey.
Yeah, but I'm not saying like that should be the determiner, but you should know you should be aware of the Doppler effect of the weatherman. You shouldn't tell him how to do his job, but we should always be aware of the 7-day forecast a little bit when we are forecasting even these silly trades. For example, Dalvin Cook really had a terrible week. He had a 69-yard scamper that made him look better. Now, I wouldn't tell you that Najee Harris is therefore like a better player, for example, or like a worse player. I'm just saying, like, you have to look at what happened versus what you think is going to happen going forward. I think ETN, for example, is very similar to Hall. I think, like Gov was saying, like at some point you're flipping a coin. So it's like, what coin do you want to flip? And in that coin flip, you're going to determine your value.
It's kind of funny. I have a very similar, or had a very similar running back room, but in my fantasy league, I had Breece Hall, I had Etienne, and I had Najee all at running back as well.
Right.
So it's a weird running back room because you have 2 guys who are up and coming, and Najee's not performing where you thought he would be at this point. So
right.
You don't know what you're going to get out of your running back room outside of CMC, and it looks like Pierce is the guy. Dalvin Cook would be a great addition.
Yeah,
like I think this strengthens the team for a playoff push, but it does get rid of your depth.
Right.
So, like, if you think you're going to be good through bye weeks, then I might make this trade. But again, it's kind of a 50-50 in my mind, as opposed to the other one that I just don't see. Like, I can't see a team that would have Allen needing all of those other pieces, most likely.
Exactly. It would honestly be like, and this will be the last point, it would honestly be like if we said it doesn't matter where Christian McCaffrey, let's say Christian McCaffrey got traded, right? And we knew he got traded. We know by Sunday he's going to play for a different team. And Cover was like, I'm putting him in my lineup no matter where he gets traded. That'd be a terrible process decision. Because it does matter where he goes. Maybe he still performs good. Maybe he doesn't know the offense, and performs bad, even if he's on a good team like Buffalo or Kansas City or any of these other good teams, like wherever you want to put him. To make these declarative statements as like guarantees is bad. I think Gov's right. It depends on what you need. If you need the depth to get to the playoffs, then go with option one. If you need the, if you're comfortable and you're like, well, if I can get to the dance, this is a better option. I think you have to know your league. Speaking of knowing our league, we're trying to keep these within an hour. So what I'm going to do, Donnie, if you're okay with it, we're going to push the spreads till next week. We'll get to it at the top of the show. We do join the people on Mondays and Fridays. So we'll be back with the spread picks on Friday. We'll make you wait for the sweet nectar of the spread as we put it on the toast, and we toast another week on Friday night.
Are we doing a show tomorrow?
We could do a show tomorrow. I don't want to commit to it. So that'll be like the special anniversary. If you get it, here's a bonus. We're not guaranteed. We will be back on Friday though. But we could potentially come back with some basketball stew for you guys. But don't count on it. But I'll let you know on Twitter. Again, like and subscribe, and you'll be able to follow all the news as it breaks.
All right, everyone. Peace out.
Have
Thanks for
night.
the questions. Love seeing everyone in chat.
Yeah. Have a good night, everybody.
It's been great. So I appreciate it very much. Donnie, any last words?
No, that's pretty much it. I hope everyone has a good rest of your night, and hopefully we see you soon.
Enjoy sports, man. Having 2 sports back is going to be fun. You got baseball too if you're into the playoffs. It's a good time to be a sports fan. Have a good one. Good night.